Welcome to Two Taps and Friends. Grab your favorite drink, get comfy, and let's dive into another episode of Two Taps and Friends.
Welcome back to Two Taps and Friends. Daniel Rosenberg, your host here. And today I've combined two very special colleagues of mine that I have on, and we put them on together in the panel for the first time. I have Michael Dye, esteemed criminal defense lawyer, trial partner for many years, and I have attorney Lloyd Golburgh, another esteemed lawyer that's been on and primarily has been on talking about the Middle East with me, kind of my Middle East expert with me that we go back and forth with. Thank you guys for coming on. Thank you guys for coming together. Welcome. You're both in the same room at the same time in the same place, which is not something that the viewers well, I'm used to it, but the viewers aren't so used to it. But listen, I thought it would be interesting because it's July, we're in July. 4th of July is right around the corner. And I wanted to kind of talk about, patriotism in the United States, and that's inevitably going to lend itself into Israel and to Iran and to U.S. interests. And I thought that what better two guys to have on together. And Michael, first of all, Michael is as American as apple pie. First of all of us are. We're all very patriotic Americans. Yes. Michael has no interest and no connection really with Israel other than he understands the moral connection and the history, and with Christianity and Judaism, he does have that. Michael's family was in U.S. military. His father was very high regarded. What was he, a sergeant or colonel? Colonel, very high up, amazing man. We miss him dearly. So Michael has that perspective as well. My family, my family is Israeli military. Lloyd's American as apple pie as well. But I thought it would be good because if there's going to be Michael could give some pushback on some of the Israel stuff, and he can give the alternative. And the thing with the Israel and the Iran and all that, it's fair to have criticism. We always say of a government, right? That's healthy, right? That's what this country is built on, right?
For sure.
It's just when, people say, oh, you're just calling everyone anti-Semitic. That's not the case. We can sense when you're talking just purely from anti-Semitism. We want to ignore the history. You don't want to respond to the responses, right? Like, there's healthy debate, and then you're just coming from a place of I hate Jews. Okay?
And we can tell the difference.
You can tell the difference, especially if you're a logical litigator, like all of us are. We're litigators, right?
Logical.
Maybe not.
Okay.
But we're used to defending the indefensible sometimes, right? And that's what we have to do. Like, you're in situations. So when Michael will give a healthy pushback, and it's fair, right? And it's not coming from my hate. It's coming from this is my perspective, or this is what I know, or maybe I don't know, right? Say something to me, right? So that's why I wanted to have you on. But I think how we start, first of all, we could start with the Iran. I think maybe we just jump right into the Iran U.S. thing that's going on, right? And we'll talk about patriotism. This conversation will lend itself to what's going on with the patriotism in this country. What is your view, Mike? Let's start with you, because obviously Lloyd and I have our opinions. We're all Americans. Let's put that up first.
Okay.
We're all Americans first, right? With Jews, sometimes it gets complicated with that because you don't get treated like American first. You get treated like a Jew sometimes, so it's tough with that. But what's your position on what's been going on with Iran? What is your take?
Well, just to back up a little bit, a general knowledge of U.S. history will show that Jewish people have been here since the beginning in the United States. I think the first synagogue was in New York, but after that, I think the second synagogue in the United States was in Charleston, South Carolina, where there's still a large Jewish population in Charleston, South Carolina. Right. And they were there during the Revolution. So, Jewish people, there have always been American Jewish people. It wasn't founded strictly on a 100% Christian nation, but it was formed. The founding fathers based everything on what we would call a Judeo-Christian values.
Exactly.
Because we do share the Old Testament.
Right. The values, morality, the values. We love life, right?
Correct. So there is a lot of shared values between us and the Jewish people in general, the Jewish people in Israel. This country shares, at least partially, European heritage, as Israel dispersed over a couple millennia.
The Jews, the
All right.
diaspora, you mean?
A lot of them settled in Europe, so we share a cultural similarities to the European Israelis.
Right.
And so we have a lot of things that are in common from a social standpoint and customs standpoint
Right.
and values in
Right.
general. But I just went way off target. What was the question?
No, but so the question was, what is your take now that we've laid out, obviously, with you laid out very well, like the history and the intertwined. It's very intertwined, the Jews and the Americans that go back to the beginning of time. But what is your take as a non-Jewish person, as a Christian American whose family was in the military, who understands what war means and understands combat and understands the losses and the sacrifices that families take in these situations? You don't take these lightly, right? Who has
Yeah.
children of age that could be militaries. What is your take on the U.S.-Iran thing?
Okay.
What's your position on it?
My position on the Iran situation, there are, just with any other country, there are going to be certain points in time when the United States interests align with the interests of a foreign country.
Right.
All right? Iran, I think, I don't want
right.
to,
Iran.
Iran,
Whatever you want to call it, we'll forgive you. Yeah.
but they cannot be allowed to have a nuclear weapon.
Right.
They've proven themselves irresponsible. They fund terrorist groups. They fund militias. They are a destabilizing force, not just for the Middle East, but for the entire world. And on top of that, that's not just a Israeli interest and a U.S. interest. That is a world interest, because even people in the Middle East should not want Iran to have a nuclear weapon,
And they
because Iran has killed more Muslims than the United States or Israel.
Right.
So, everybody's common interest aligns here. Iran can't have the nuclear weapon. All right, this needed to be done. We always kind of knew that there was going to need to be American assistance. Initially, from the beginning, Israel didn't have the military or the logistical capability to carry out the strikes on the facilities without in-air refueling, which was a big problem. So I know that President Trump and Pete Hegseth got up there and said, the United States had nothing to do with that. That's bullshit. All right, because
Fair. I agree with that.
Israel did not have the tanker planes to enable their pilots to fly to
that-
Iran and back.
Right.
The United States helped.
That's fact.
All right, it's just the way it is.
Right.
As far as
Yeah, but do you have an objection to that?
no, none of it was reasonable. I think,
Right.
and for both, like I said, our interests are aligned. I think the issue that a lot of people are having is, and you can go on YouTube and look at this, ever since 1993, Benjamin Netanyahu, charismatic guy, speaks English really well, resonates with the American
MIT.
public. Okay, with my dad. And so the issue is, since 1993, he's been going on giving speeches that Iran is 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a couple months, maybe a year or two at most, away from getting a nuclear weapon. So there's a little bit of fatigue there. It's like, you've been saying that for the past 32 years. Why are we supposed to believe? And it never came true. Why are we supposed to believe you now?
Right.
All right?
But the pushback on that. The pushback on that was that they've been developing and getting close, but then there's been inspections, there's been things that have derailed it, and repeatedly they have been close over and over again. Now, obviously, there's some doomsday talk probably going on by a world leader, for sure, right?
Mm-hmm.
But again, do you have that much of an objection to that? You know
No.
what I mean? Right. So go ahead. I didn't mean to break your thought.
Well, I mean, I don't have.
The issue is with Bibi Netanyahu, the way he's been kind of saying it over and over again. You lose the audience.
Yeah, when you repeatedly say something over a course of over 30 years and it never comes to fruition,
Right.
you kind of lose a little bit of credibility. One of the things my dad said that I remember a couple years before he passed away was that you had the Industrial Revolution in the early 1900s, and right now he labeled this the communication revolution, where politicians were used to being able to tell certain lies, and since if the lie was happening on the other side of the world, then nobody would ever know, because you'd get like a 2-second blurb from a news cable saying something, and you had to trust your politicians. These days, with YouTube and all the old videos getting loaded up on YouTube in one centralized location, and having the access to all the world's knowledge in a phone on your pocket, you can't get away with the bullshit that you used to be able to get away with, for lack of a better term. Some people don't know how to discern what's bullshit from what's factual.
Right.
And some people don't know how to, like you were saying, that they were close, it got derailed, or were close, got derailed. That requires a deep dive into the factual situation.
I agree.
Which most people aren't willing to do.
Right.
All they're seeing is Benjamin Netanyahu saying, they're 2 weeks away, they're a month away, a year away at most, and then here we are in 2025, and now it's time.
Right. Well, I think that you saw the same clips we're seeing. People put them all together, and then TikTok put it out on an algorithm, and that's a game. That's gamemanship.
Absolutely.
Lloyd, what's your response to that?
No, I think he's right. I think, I hope he's right. And,
Right.
and I'll tell you why. I think you're right, and I hope you're right. And the reason why is because what you're saying is that the pushback is just skepticism. So if all it is skepticism by the lazy or the uninformed, I'll take that any day of the week.
Right.
Right? Because you can deal with skepticism with facts. So, it's not just that it got derailed and it was back on, it got derailed and it's back on. We had an Iran deal that was, accomplished by President Obama that had, sunset clauses, expiration dates. And so when you couple the fact that those expiration dates were in 2025, right? And then our intelligence tells us that they have way more uranium than is necessary for civil purposes.
Right.
Now you have what seems to be an emergency. So if you can overcome the skepticism, because I think in another episode, you said, what could the argument be pro-Iran? And I think it is a skepticism of our intelligence. And of course, you can maintain that attitude. I don't believe that, what Pete Hegseth says. I don't believe what Donald Trump says about the intelligence. So you can maintain that. But if it's just skepticism, I'm all for that. So if it's not anti-Semitism and it's not progressive wokeism, that's wonderful news to me, right? Because if it's just skepticism, you can deal with that by, facts.
And that's
Sticking to the subject of Iran, one of the other issues that we have here is, and I really don't think this is as big a deal as people are making it out to be. There's a targeted strike on a specific facility.
Right.
There are no civilians there. The collateral damage.
no U.S.
bill.
troops.
Yeah. This is great.
Fighter pilots all okay.
Yeah. And I don't see anything wrong here.
I think that's all political fear tactics. We're going to war. There's going to be boots on the ground. Oh my God, America! We can't be drawn into a war. That, like you said, that's bullshit.
And that's exactly
precision
what I'm
strikes
getting
on
at is that, we've heard the weapons of mass destruction excuse before.
Right.
To go into a war.
Yes.
All right, and that dragged us into 15 some odd years in Iraq,
Right.
where we had no idea what the hell our end game was. All right, we should have gone in there, cleared out, and left.
Yes.
And let the Iraqis decide how they want to be governed. Not everybody needs or wants a Western-style democracy. All right? If they want to be ruled by Sharia law, that's their business. It's not ours.
Right.
So, and this just goes way back into politics. When Bill Clinton was president, Saddam Hussein tried to have George Bush, the first Bush, assassinated. I don't know why we didn't go to war right then. You should have a policy that if you try to assassinate a president or a former president, it's war and you're going to go.
Right.
And when Bush II got into office, it seems like he was a little hesitant to say, we're going to war because he tried to kill my dad. Even though, even though it was completely justified.
To you, but that he would have eaten a bunch of criticism.
Exactly,
right?
because the media would
Pull
say,
back,
you know,
right?
it's because it's your dad. No, it's because it's a former president of the United States that you tried to kill. And if somebody tried to assassinate Joe Biden, I'd say, go to war tomorrow. All right? And it doesn't matter what side of the aisle they're on.
Right.
But Bill Clinton let the assassination attempt on a former president slide, and then the next president who's up happens to be the son of that former president.
Right.
Everybody knew we were going to go to war in Iraq.
Right. What do you say to these critics? And this really gets to me. When you get the, like, you know, people that hate Trump, right? Like, he didn't even go in front of Congress and ask for war. Like, obviously, how many wars have been started by an act of Congress, right? It doesn't work that way, right? People don't understand what they're even saying. Like, that AOC idiot. Why
But
is this woman...
Kennedy said she's the reason that there's directions on a shampoo bottle.
Jesus. Like, who is this girl? Like, what the hell? Like, she should be impeached immediately. I'm like, listen, lady, just please, someone shut this girl down. Like, shut her up. You know, what is your, I mean, you guys know the law. So
Well,
what's
the
your
war.
take
First
on
off, the War Powers Act is probably unconstitutional. Number one,
Right.
You know, the president's the commander-in-chief of the U.S. Armed Forces.
Exactly.
He can order the armed forces to do whatever. War is a different animal entirely, because when you declare war, then the Geneva Conventions come into play,
Right.
things like that. So, you know, Congress gets to declare war. Congress does not need to approve every military strike.
Right. That's what it is. But that's the difference. The devil's in the details, right? Like,
Always.
you can't just call war, everything's war. That's not war. We weren't at war.
No.
We just went and dropped a bunker buster on some nuclear sites and got out. We didn't
14
say-
of them, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we demolished them, and then you got the media that came in, and, you know, and that's what it kind of leads to. And look, we could talk about Bibi Netanyahu and all that. That could be a conversation, you know, that.
Right, it's a whole nother.
That's a whole nother thing, right? You know, but criticism of him is fair game, and criticism of governments is fair game.
Sure.
What I can't stand to see is the way our country has been wired now because of this hate of Trump. And I can't say that the Republicans weren't doing it with Biden and the Republicans.
Sure.
But I think
they're both
but I think one party
two
is
heads of the
quicker
same
to shit on the country than the other one is. I will say that. Like, we went in and had a precision strike on a nuclear facility, did it brilliantly, got in, got out, no troops on the ground, minimal civilian damage. That should have been applauded. It should have been applauded by the entire world, if you ask me my opinion, but at the very least, Americans, right?
Well, I think a strong
CNN,
majority
at
of
the
the
very
American
least.
public supported those strikes.
Yeah.
Right. Because,
Right? The issue is with the media and with the portion of the Democratic Party.
right.
Well, I'm a registered libertarian, so you know, I have no dog in the Republican-Democrat fight. But it does seem to me like, and you know, both sides are going to say it's the other party, but it does seem to me, I won't name the party, has a vested interest in seeing all of the country fail, because they have no clear vision for the country, and because of that, they want to see every attempt to do something fail so that they can stay or get back into power, so that they can have a monopoly on power. And it's unfortunate that when one group of people has no economic policies, has no realistic social policies, the only thing they have is, I want to see the other side fail.
And the indoctrination is what concerns me of the youth. Like, I'm sorry, but I think that to find a young person that's patriotic these days, and I can't speak to all, obviously, but what I see, I think you're going to see more that are not than are. Where in our generation, differences aside, political views aside, like I was just talking to Lloyd about earlier, like after 9/11, like, do you remember the tone of this country?
Yeah.
Like, we were all unified. Like, and that's one thing that people don't understand about Israel, too. Like, Israel has this infighting, not to veer, but we'll come back. Israel has infighting just like any other country, more so than some other countries, right? It's a heated debate, but you
It's about
attack...
the Supreme Court last.
Right, well, huh?
I think it was about Israel's Supreme Court.
Yeah, because he was trying to, was doing some things where he was trying to reform some of the Supreme Court, and they lost their minds. People fought him. But you get attacked, you attack Israel, you're unifying that country.
Yeah.
Hands across. People are like, well, half the country wants a two-state solution. Not now. No, they don't. Go do a poll. Go do a real poll. They're unified. And it happened here at 9/11, right? 9/11, like, we didn't give a shit, like, you were a Democrat or Republican. You just watched friends, families, citizens, fellow Americans get, like, slaughtered. Like, we were unified.
Yep.
I was telling Lloyd,
I
I'm
think
scared.
probably Mayor Giuliani had like a 99%
Of
approval
course,
rating.
because
at that
this is
time.
time to get together. Like, we can have in-house fighting, but when the team is in a fight, the team needs to be a team. I don't know that we have that anymore. Like, when I think about this a lot. Like, I go to lacrosse matches and the Star Spangled Banner. Like, I take that shit seriously. Like,
Yeah.
I don't talk. People are standing. We got our hands on our heart. Like, I was just at the tomb of the unknown soldier
Yep.
in D.C. That was some moving shit.
Sure is, yeah.
I mean, you see family. You see the military's family. People came that is some moving. That's patriotism. Like, how could you not love this country for what it gives you as an American, right? So when people question my loyalty to America because I'm advocating for some other foreign country, I'm advocating for this foreign country in this situation, but I see them as intertwined. Like, I'm sorry, but if you go to some of these Middle Eastern countries, they're not talking, they don't like us, right?
Well, you know, that's another interesting point, is that people like to pretend like the issue that the United States is having with Middle Eastern countries is something new, and it wasn't. Going back to the Barbary Coast, when the Marine Corps hymn, you know, this is from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. What happened? What was the shores of Tripoli about?
Right.
Well, our merchant ships were sailing along the coast in North Africa off of what's Libya. I don't know if it was Libya back then, but Tripoli existed, and the ships from those areas were pirates, and they would raid our ships, take all of our supplies, take our ship, and enslave all of our sailors.
Right.
And so when we asked them to kindly stop, they said, no, the Quran gives us the right to
You're
take...
infidels.
Yeah, you're infidels, and the Quran gives us the right to take you as slaves. And so, as you can imagine, if it's in the Marine Corps hymn, somebody got their ass kicked. And, but the problems with, you know, it's not... The problems didn't start with the division of
The Palestinian
the
mandate.
Palestinian mandate, which is where a lot of people think our problems there started. Not true. These problems have been going on since the 1800s.
I'm so glad you brought that up because that's a major thing that people don't know. The shores of Tripoli, exactly. They literally looked at, I think it was John Adams and those guys. I don't even remember what it was.
Yeah, John Adams.
John Adams was like, what do you mean? They're like, well, you're infidels. We're entitled to this by God. He was like, all right, well, we got to attack these dudes.
Yeah.
But like, so talk to military. That's what I tell people. Talk to U.S. military personnel that have been in that region. They're all going to be on the side of Israel, whether they agree with their policies or not. They listen, one side hates us, the other side doesn't. I grew up an American. I born in New York, raised in New Jersey and Carolina and Florida and Ohio. I've been all over this beautiful country, dude. And I've always considered myself an American. Like when I moved to Israel for a few years, I moved there, I was American, right? They treated me, hey, yes, you're Jewish, you have family, but you're American. But to them, it was like Michael Jordan walking around. You're American? Like their eyes light up because they love America. They love what it stands for. And most of the countries, I don't know about now with this indoctrination, but they love what this stood for. And that was a source of pride. It should be a source of pride. So like when I see the youth aligning with this cult following and this death cult that's infiltrated, it's aggravating. And that's why I liked, like you like to post, Michael's one of these guys that he likes to cause shit, right?
I troll.
If
Yeah.
he sees you get a rise out of you,
Yeah.
he'll say whatever.
Yeah.
People say to me, oh, Michael. I remember when I first started hanging out with Michael, like I remember one of the prosecutors comes to me, he's a Jewish guy, he goes, dude, you're friends with Michael Dye? I go, yeah, friends. Yeah, more of a brotherhood, but he's a fucking nut job. But yes, you know, and he goes, well, he's anti-Semitic. I'm like, no, he's not. And they're like, no, you know what he did in law school? I'm like, oh, God, what did he do in law school? He started a whole war with the Jewish Lawyers Association. I'm like, that sounds like Michael.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. What did they do to him?
right.
He
Maybe
said
he had a
some
reason.
comment. They called him anti-Semite, and he went nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
I,
that's-
I would just post something new every day, like Happy USS Liberty Day.
Yeah,
know?
he would just be, he
Boom.
would do that. But
Instigate.
that's why I love him. Like, I know he's not anti-Semitic. I know that when push comes to shove, Michael knows where loyalties will lie if you're an American, right? So I thought is interesting. Like when Michael gives a pushback on the Israeli situation, I think it's a fair pushback. I think sometimes you don't have the knowledge that we have, but you at least will acknowledge it, listen to it.
There's a compliment in there somewhere.
Yeah.
This is the friendship. But you get what I'm saying?
I
Like,
understand
when
what
you-
you're saying. I try to be really well informed. A lot of people who know me superficially wouldn't think that I'm actually a really strong advocate for human rights.
Sure.
But people who know me a little better tend to realize that, and so I mean, there are some. I do have some issues with some of the things that Israel's done over the years.
Sure.
Where I'm like, hey, that's not right, and but I've gone ahead. If I see something that concerns me, I'll listen to both sides of it,
Right.
and then I can make my decision or decide that I still don't know enough and I just can't.
Or
I
you
can't
know
push
enough
back.
and disagree, which is perfectly fine. I mean, either of those two things are okay.
Right.
The issue for us is when people focus solely on Israel and they don't consider, all of the other, countries in the world that are committing great crimes solely because their focus is on the Jewish state, right? So that's where the problem becomes, is when you're no longer objective and your obsession is with the Jews. And I don't get that from you.
Yeah, well, what I do is like, my dad was always like look at the tag, find out where it's from, friend or enemy. If it's enemy, toss
Yeah,
it.
right,
So it's like nothing in my house is made in Vietnam.
Well,
Right? Because there was a funny story about my dad. He flew in Vietnam. His primary plane. He was an experimental test pilot, but he flew the A6 Intruder. And so I'm in the
Wow.
mall, and they had all these like wooden planes and stuff. And I was looking at them, and they had an A6, like carved A6 Intruder. And so I looked at it, and I'm like, man, I'm gonna buy this for my dad. And I flip it over, and it says "Made in Vietnam." And I was like, dun I'm like,
I'm not buying
do I
this
just
for my
take off
dad.
the tag, or and so I call him and I'm like, hey Dad, this really beautiful A6 Intruder, but it's made in Vietnam. I thought you might find it kind of humorous that they're making the plane that you used to use to drop bombs on them. So if you want me to get it, all right, I'll go ahead and I'll grab it. But if you don't, and he's just like, no, you know better than that. And so I'm like, okay, not buying it.
right. But
Well, we can't. I mean, I've driven German cars. I haven't had a Ford. But I guess we would have to avoid Fords and German cars. We'd have to avoid getting on to an Otis elevator in any building. I
yeah,
mean,
it's impossible. He's joking.
it's almost
obviously.
impossible to do that.
You can avoid German cars.
Yeah,
You can avoid the German car, yes.
yeah, they're good cars though, But I mean, listen. But you do agree in this situation that like the Jewish state genuinely, they have these people that literally are hell bent on just destroying them. You understand that?
Yeah,
You agree with
absolutely. Yeah.
that? You see that principle right there is a starting point for a conversation, right? Like if you could say that, then the criticism is fair. But when your position is that you think that they're just trying to colonize the Middle East,
Well, I think, a lot of people don't know the history of what happened as Israel was formed. And I think there were some shitty things that happened.
Sure.
Right? I'm just, war's never a pretty thing, all right? Go back to Israel's first prime minister, which was Menachem Begin,
yeah,
all right? Probably not the nicest dude in the world. All right, he was part of I'm not going to be able to pronounce it. It's like Irgun.
Irgun.
Irgun. Okay, there you go. He was part of a paramilitary organization. Now, there's nothing to say that he actually took place in like the Deir Yassin massacre or the King David Hotel bombing, the execution. They hung a bunch of British soldiers. But he supported it. All right, and he was definitely part of that movement, and the actions of those individuals is widely considered to be terrorism. All right, so somebody hears that and they say, "Well, Israel was founded on terrorism." No, that's one dude. All right, one dude and a handful of others who ended up having, it doesn't mean that you've got to segregate. My whole thing is you've got to segregate the Israeli government from the Israelis. All right?
Right, because it changes.
Yeah.
And by the way, you have to separate the Irgun from the Haganah too.
Okay.
And you have to, like you said,
They're hardliners.
You kind of hit the nail on the head when you said it was a group of individuals. It was bigger than a group of individuals, of course, but it was a subset, okay, of militant right-wing Zionists, right, who. It was terrorism. Let's not even beat around the bush, okay?
By definition,
So
right?
It was terrorism, but it had a specific goal,
Yeah.
all right? And the goal wasn't to kill Arabs, right? The goal wasn't to colonize and destroy and take over. The goal was to prevent the British government from reneging on its promise to create the Jewish state in the area of Palestine, right? Within the area of Palestine. So that was the purpose. And you're absolutely right. I mean, Begin was part of the Irgun, and they had their own particular idea of how to hasten the establishment of the Jewish state. And you're right. I mean, they were condemned also by, mainstream Israeli government, the Yishuv, right, the Jewish people in Israel, and marginalized and prosecuted. But you're right, Begin rose to prominence.
Well, another thing is a lot of people don't understand is Israel has a parliamentary system for what's it, the Knesset?
Yep.
All right. So Israel has a parliamentary system. So the prime minister is not necessarily the guy who got, like 48, 49% of the vote. Because correct me if I'm wrong here, but I'm just going off general knowledge of parliamentary systems. That an individual, you vote for the party appoints the person, and then there's 30, 40 different parties, and they come together to form
a coalition,
coalitions
right.
to garner over 51% of the vote, and then they determine, you'll have like 20 parties forming a coalition to determine who the prime minister is. So, I'm not sure what the breakdown was when Begin was prime minister, but he could be a guy who got his party got 7% of the vote, but he ends up being prime minister because
Right.
a large
It's a complicated way they do it.
In other words, there's no mandate necessarily for any particular
prime minister. Yeah, and that I'll get into some of the more touchy ones.
But like,
Ariel Sharon.
well, but let's talk about it real quick just to jump now. So when it is complex, I don't know that I like it, but it's still an elected government, right? They have coalitions, they have to work with different opinions, different groups. And that's what the pushback on Bibi was. Netanyahu now is that part of that coalition was the religious side. And a lot of people in Israel, people think they hear Israel as just like religious zealot. It's not. It's the most liberal country in the Middle East, right? But they help form in this coalition. So you hear these propagandists saying, oh, he's the religious zealot, he's religious, and he's not. In that coalition, they use those seats to help get them to that point. Ariel Sharon you're bringing up now, but you have to also understand the backdrop of like Begin. Where does he come from? What does he come out of?
He's coming out of the Holocaust.
The Holocaust. He's coming out of like fighting off like the British. And you could say the terrorism, if you want to be a critic of our country, right? What are you going to call Sam Adams and those guys, right? They're like sitting there sabotaging and they're doing, in the formation of a government or of a country, things are going to happen. Ugly things are going to happen.
Yeah.
To whitewash it and say that was terrorism, when in our eyes, we're fighting for our freedoms, right? We have our arguments too. The difference is, what is the goal here? Like Lloyd brought up, like, what was the goal of Sam Adams and these guys? Did they want to just kill and murder all Europeans? No. They wanted their own independence. They wanted their own representation. They wanted their own country. We're working and we're getting taxed. These people all the way over there. Who the hell are these people, right? What do the Israelis, what does Begin want? Does he want to murder Christians? Does he want to murder Jews? No. He wants a country he wants Zionism, a country for the Jews, so they're not relying on governments at the drop of a whim, throwing them in ovens and shipping them out. That's what he wants, right? What does Hamas want? What does Iran want? You know, Iran has independence. What the hell do they want? Why are they funding all this shit? You know, but you make a statement like they want to kill Christians and Jews, and it sounds some extreme, but that's what they want to do. So I think you have to assess things based on what is the goal of this group, right? Not so much in what steps have they taken. But the steps are fair game for criticism, right? Like, sorry to interrupt. What were you gonna say?
Not a problem. I
No,
mean,
and you're right, and that you know, encompasses the definition of genocide.
Right.
Brings us back to genocide. What is
Right.
the goal here? So, you know, the Israelis, their goal is not to just eliminate the Palestinian population. Their goal is to, A, get their hostages back, B, prevent Hamas from being able to do what they did ever again, right? And C, to live in peace and dignity. That's their goal. That's not genocide. Whereas Hamas's sole goal, sole purpose in their charter is to destroy the Jewish state and kill all the Jews.
Right.
Well,
That's genocide.
let's back off of Ariel for
Yeah.
a second and touch that because that's a more
Right.
pressing issue right now. All right. One of the issues that many people have, including myself,
Right.
is the way that Israel is handling the situation in Gaza. Now, let's take it back to a very simple concept.
Yep.
The difference between efficient and effective.
Right.
All right? If you have a fly on the wall and you take a sledgehammer and you hit the fly, it's effective because it killed the fly.
Right.
But you look at the damage that happened around it.
Right.
If you use a fly swatter, that is both efficient and effective. All right? Now, Israel, you know, and I don't think you can run a conventional type of war
No way.
in Gaza
Right.
without substantial collateral damage.
And why is that?
All right? Because it's the size of a postage
Not
stamp.
just that. Why else?
All right. Their civilian population and their military overlap.
Well, they've embedded themselves there.
Well, where else are they supposed to go?
Well, come on.
There's no place.
Yeah, but they're under tunnels. They've embedded. So they have to put their missile. They have to put their missiles in under children's beds.
All right, Danny, here's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but
though.
if you're saying if they have no place, then you're admitting that the entire population is basically Hamas.
No, I'm saying that it is the most densely populated
That I agree.
place
I agree.
on planet Earth.
That's true.
Well,
All right.
that's what they say. I don't
So
know that
the
that's-
problem is that if you take missiles and put them anywhere, there's going to be a crib somewhere within a couple hundred feet of it.
Bullshit, Mike. Come on.
All
Let's be
right?
honest.
It's not bullshit.
You put it
Yeah,
in your office.
That's
you gotta put it in
yeah,
the
but no,
kid's
no, 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 no.
bedroom.
But that's excusing the actual behavior. They're not saying, okay,
Fair.
well, we have no place to put it. They're digging tunnels in children's bedrooms on purpose. That's different.
Right.
So,
Entrances to the tunnels.
Now here's my other point.
Okay.
I understand the counterpoint.
I got it.
We can
No,
disagree
no,
on
go ahead.
that.
Finish your thought.
All right.
No, you're right.
But, all right, you might not like it, but your enemy gets a say in how the war is fought. All right?
Right.
And the thing that I use, all right, is if your kid's in a bank and somebody goes in and takes your kid hostage and is holding a gun to his head, and he's like, I'm going to kill everybody all around here. And the police sniper says, I've got a shot. And they say, take it. And he shoots through your kid and into the hostage taker, and kills your kid, kills the hostage taker, saves 17 lives. All right? You think the father of that kid's going to say that that was okay?
No, of course not.
Okay. So that's what you've got with the Palestinian people. They're not volunteering to be put in front of the bullets.
Some of them.
All right? It was, well, true. But the kids, like
Oh, I agree.
little
I
kids,
agree with that.
they're not volunteering to be put in front of
Sure.
the bullets. Hamas is putting them in front of the bullets, whether by happenstance or intentionally. It really doesn't matter.
Right.
But one of the things, I remember my dad teaching me when shooting guns, which happened a lot, was you're responsible for everything downrange for your gun. All right?
Right.
So if you see somebody running behind your target, you don't shoot. all right? You see somebody running in front of your target, you don't shoot. You only shoot what you intend to kill, all right? And that is a limit to collateral damage. The approach Israel takes seems to be this. They say, hey, we're going to drop a 500-pound bomb on this apartment building. How much warning they give them is debatable, but let's just say they give them a couple hours.
Right.
And then Hamas surrounds the building with soldiers and says, you're not leaving. All right? Do you still drop the 500-pound bomb on the building?
What do you do then?
You don't.
You don't. Okay, but
Don't
what
drop
do you,
it.
What do you do? with
Right,
all
that's the-
hostages?
All right?
Yeah, so that's
You've
kind of the
gotta
question.
start
It's like, how do you-
You've got to start using more special warfare
Yeah, but they
type
are.
things.
They
All
are.
right? More.
You're not seeing that. They
Right.
are though.
But here's like, I don't like to give Obama much credit for anything. All right? But I'll tell you that when Osama bin Laden, they found him in Abbottabad, Pakistan. All right? And one of the proposals was just drop a bomb on the place.
Yeah, but that's
Oh,
apples
but
and
it's not-
oranges, Mike.
Obama said several reasons why not. A, there's kids in there. All right. B, there's women in there. C, I don't want this place to have his body parts mangled up into it and become a shrine for people to make
Agreed.
a pilgrimage
Agreed.
to. So he took it was a very risky mission. He took a risk. He sent in
Deltas.
the SEALs.
The SEALs.
They got the job done, didn't kill any women and children, and didn't take any, I don't think they killed any women and children, or at least,
They killed some family members.
Yeah, but I mean, how can you
but
compare
the
that?
casualties were significantly
Right,
minimized.
but isn't that apples and oranges to this situation?
I don't think it is.
Why? You're going to a compound where you know the guy is, right? You know the guy is, and your argument would stand if Israel hadn't had ground forces in there the entire time. Israel has soldiers on the ground; they're dying every day, so they're trying this. You get what I'm saying? Like, I would agree with
I mean,
you
you're-
if,
but you're-
if
but it-
Israel was just attacking from the air, solely dropping bombs, but they have both going on. I just don't know how you do it otherwise. I
It's gonna-
understand your argument.
I'm not a military logistics guy.
Right.
But
It's a fantasy what you're describing, because first of all, you're talking about, you know, you're from afar with Osama bin Laden. Like he said, you're in an isolated compound. You're looking for one guy. You don't have hostages strewn all over the enclave, and you don't have at least 30,000 fighters on the ground. So how are you supposed to send in special ops to take out 30,000 fighters
Well,
in
my
an urban enclave like that you said that is so densely populated with literally booby-trapped hiding places everywhere and tunnels all under the entire infrastructure?
Mogadishu is a better example.
Okay, and what I would say.
And you saw what happened
to
there. We
that-
lost.
Well, that was because of bad leadership.
But of course. But,
Yeah, yeah,
But
that's
what
true.
I'm saying as far
and
as
a bad plan.
the landscape is more accurate.
Okay, here's the thing. The-
And I'm all for solutions. I love to hear
The
other
war-
solutions from people.
Nobody wants to see kids dying.
Of course.
Yeah, the war is going to take longer than Israel wants. If Israel wants to maintain the moral high road on this, the war is going to take longer than it wants, and it's going to be bloodier.
Bloodier than
it
they
wants.
want. Agreed. I agree
Yeah,
with that.
and-
But that's
and-
a fair.
and the
But this
problem
is
is-
fair commentary.
It is fair. This is what I mean. This is why
Right.
I love this kind of conversation where I like it when he instigates.
Right. But he's not. He's pushing
you're
back.
respectful, and you're providing you know a viewpoint based on facts, and that's perfectly fine. So that's what I say to people. That's why you did the right thing. You said how. That's what nobody ever does. Everybody argues and yells at each other, and they dig in, but nobody goes, okay, well, how or why? And you did that, and your answer's
And it's tough
perfectly
to really
reasonable.
find
You
out
know-
what operations they're really doing. You don't know what the Israeli military.
I don't.
You don't, of course.
But
this is
I
fair
can
commentary.
tell you that they have dropped 500-pound bombs in civilian populated areas.
Like,
All
they're
right.
all civilian populated areas, Mike. In
Exactly.
fairness.
Okay, that's fine. And I'm not saying that we didn't do the same thing in World War II to
Oh,
Germany.
we did
in
a lot
Berlin.
worse.
We did.
We
And
dropped a goddamn atomic bomb.
Yeah, but things have progressed in the last 80 years.
I understand.
The sense of morality has progressed in the last 80 years. So my thing is that if Israel, you know, if Israel wants me to give the permission and give me my blessing for the high road, like Israel's taking the high road, they got to stop dropping bombs in places where they know civilians are. Doesn't matter if Hamas is holding them there or not. Israel has hostages too. A lot of these people are being held hostage by Hamas too. They're not allowed out of their apartment
I agree.
buildings. All right? But the fact that they were born on the wrong side of the fence doesn't mean that we get to drop a 500-pound bomb.
I
on them.
agree with that too, and I think that they have that in mind. I know. See, the problem is I know high military officials. I know a lot of soldiers. I know these people's hearts and minds.
Yeah.
They are thinking the same thing you're thinking. I can assure you from personal relationship and experience. So like from the outside looking in, I understand. And look, it's fair. What you're doing, it sounds like, a coach or assistant coach trying to coach his team, right? Like, don't throw that check. Don't tackle at the knees. Don't do that. We can figure something. That's fair, right? That's fair. But the question is do you have the full knowledge, and do I have the full knowledge to literally really sit here and criticize a military that's sending their kids in there and they're all dying and they're there. The foot soldiers are there. They are sending these missions in. How do you get into these tunnels? How do you get past these tunnels? How do you get past the booby traps?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, if
Do
Israel...
you just keep sending your people to
it
get
was-
blown up and die?
Right. I mean, if the purpose was to just slaughter, they wouldn't have put boots on the ground in the first place.
Right.
Israel's lost over 860 kids since the war started, right? Why would you sacrifice this next generation? Remember, everybody in Israel has to serve, right? Except the Hasidim and the Arabs. So if you're an Israeli citizen, you're required to go into the military. So Israel sacrificed 800 and something kids, right, in order to go try to do this and by putting boots on the ground. Certainly, like you said, of course you want to try to minimize civilian casualties. And Israel bends over backwards to do that. I've seen plenty of videos from pilots, where you see the communication between the pilot and the ground where they're saying, abort mission, there are children. I've seen these videos myself. And like he said, when you go and you sit and, the soldiers come over and, they meet with the Jewish community. And we go to the Chabad, we sit down and we talk to them, and of course it pains them, that there are civilians being killed. But every one of them to a man will tell you they do everything they can to avoid civilian casualties. And what I thought was ironic earlier about what you said was, whether the warning is 2 hours or whether the warning is 30 minutes, it brings me back to the reality of, on what planet does any aggressor warn their enemy that they're coming?
We did in Hiroshima.
Did we do that?
Yeah, we did.
Well,
That was a hell of a
so
warning.
good. So that
Well, yeah,
that
the Japanese
aligns.
the Japanese soldiers, flyers were dropped over Hiroshima saying,
Oh, yeah.
get the F out, and the Japanese soldiers were told, do not let
Yeah, yeah, of
anybody read
course.
the leaflet.
Yeah, no,
Look.
the Japanese forget it. They're
They were cruel.
they're going down.
Well, look,
they're
we're
going
kind
down
of
fighting.
running out of time here, but it lends itself to we did it, right?
Yeah.
And that's the point I'm trying to say.
Well, the morality
Well,
aligned.
But as long as the U.S., like Americans have to understand the Israelis are the same like-minded people, the same government, they stand for the same principles. And as long as that is aligned, that's why, like, when I see people in our country that aren't patriotic, that's what concerns me. Now, 4th of July coming up, it's a good conversation to have. Of course, we have the last couple of minutes here, but, like, that concerns me. Like, of course you're going to go attack the only democracy in the Middle East if you're attacking your own democracy, if you can't even see the value of our country anymore, if our youth doesn't understand what this country is and, like, what a beacon of hope this country is for the world. We're not a perfect government. We're not the perfect legal system, but we're the most perfect one out there, I'll tell you that. And we're always upgrading and improving, and we're open for criticism. When we're doing this like we're doing.
Sure. Many more people trying to get into the United States than any other country in the world.
Sure.
My last point would be, much like the United States and Vietnam, Israel finding itself in the exact same position. In Vietnam, we were creating enemies faster than we could kill them. And Israel is doing the same thing in Gaza. They're creating more enemies for themselves. And whether it's Hamas's fault, that's a value-neutral statement.
Right.
All right, it's not saying that it's anybody's fault. More enemies are coming out of this situation than allies.
Right.
So
And you know what? I
you've
blame
got to
I
find
blame,
a
I
way.
blame the world for that. In other words, what you're saying, it could be objectively true, right? Like you said, it doesn't matter what the reason is or how that's happening, but let's say that is a fact. Okay, I blame the world for that because I still believe that, the world leaves Israel out there on their own, this tiny little country to deal with this Islamic threat that threatens the entire world. So Israel's left alone, and I still believe this to this very day, that on October 8th, if all the responsible world leaders stood up on TV together and said, hey, Hamas, you got 24 hours to lay down your weapons and to release those hostages, or we're all going to come take care of you, it would have happened. So, I think that's part of the problem is that, we expect so much from Israel, we meaning the world community, and we provide them with no support. That's my position.
Israel needs to change the way they're operating. I don't know how, all right? But they
Therein
need to do
lies the rub.
something.
It's close to the end now.
Well,
Yeah.
therein lies the rub.
But what I will
we don't know how. What is the alternative?
Right,
And
no.
you know, I know the Jewish people, and if we had a way, another way, a better way, we'd be doing it.
And what I would say is the Jewish people, if the Jewish people have to be hated to solve this problem for the U.S. and for all the free West,
Better to be hated than
Jews are
dead.
used to being hated, man. And I got to tell you, like the enemies that are created, I bet you maybe 1% of them are going to be new enemies. They're always going to be enemies. They're always going to find a way. They're always going to hate. But it's fair. I think it's healthy to have guys like you that are pushing back and giving.
Yeah, I love this.
criticism.
Let's do this
I think
again.
it's fair, and I think it's good conversation, and you get to solutions in this way, which is something that's lost in the world right now. You know, I think it's good, and I'm glad you came on. I'm glad we got all back together. I think you guys have plans for 4th of July. What are you guys doing 4th of July?
Blowing shit up.
I'm blowing shit up too.
Yep.
Yeah, how about you?
No,
Peacefully.
I stay away from
I
that.
know. I go and I get these. I have put on the whole fireworks.
Yeah.
Right? It's a big deal for me. 4th of July. I think it should be for everybody,
Yeah, me
especially
too.
these days. You know. And so, thank you
I'll
guys.
leave that to other people.
Well,
I'll go see a show.
Exactly. Well, dude, happy 4th to you guys. Thank you guys for coming on. It's always a pleasure having
Thank
you
you.
both. Love you both. Thank you for coming on. We'll have you more. Thank you all the viewers and listeners for listening. We appreciate all the views. I wish happy 4th of July to all of you. Hope you guys have a good time with your families, cook out, do fireworks, do it all. Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Like I've been saying, that really gives a lot of power to the channel, gives a lot of power to all of us. It gives us motivated, gets us more viewers, it gets us more outreach, which helps and gets more content out. We can get more people on there and do all that kind of stuff. But thank you all so much. We appreciate it all. Like and subscribe. We're on YouTube, YouTube Music. We're on Instagram. We're on Spotify. Listen to us on Apple Podcasts. We're everywhere. Appreciate you all. Love you all. And we'll see you soon. Goodbye. Cut.
Peace out.